Dr. Lambert completed his undergraduate and medical school education at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. He went on to complete his family medicine residency at Marshall with a certificate in the Rural Health and Leadership Program, serving as chief resident in his final year. He has been working in graduate and undergraduate medical education for 15 years and is currently clinical associate professor and residency program director for Cabarrus Family Medicine Residency in Concord, North Carolina. A graduate of both the Faculty Development Fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill and the National Institute for the Program Director Development Fellowship, he is an active educator with all levels of learner and an advocate for a full spectrum of family medicine care. His particular interests are in competency-based medical education, wilderness medicine, and rural health. When not at work, Dr. Lambert enjoys spending time hiking and playing outdoors with his wife and 4 children, playing the organ and piano, and catching up on sleep. For over 26 years, Pamela MacMillan has been a cornerstone at the University of Wyoming Family Medicine Residency Program in Cheyenne. Since 2004, she has excelled as a program administrator, ensuring the smooth operation and success of the program. Pamela's dedication extends beyond her administrative role. She has been an active member of the Association of Family Medicine Administrators since 2006, serving on the board of directors for the past 5 years. In 2023, she proudly took on the role of AFMA president, leading with vision and passion. Additionally, Pamela contributes her expertise to the Society for Teachers in Family Medicine's CBME task force. Throughout her illustrious career, Pamela has been a guiding light for countless individuals navigating their graduate medical education or various program roles. Her unwavering support has fostered lasting relationships, with many staying in close contact long after their time in the program. So thank you for that, and we'll go ahead and hand it over.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Well, we are super excited to talk to you all today about individualized learning plans. Dr. Lambert and I both sit on the STFM task force for competency-based medical education, and the ILPs is one of our babies, is the best way to say it. And so Dr. Lambert has been a spearhead in that. We're super excited that you could join us today, and we are going to talk about those ILPs that the ACGME is requiring for all of our residents that began in July of 2024. And so maybe some of you aren't currently using ILPs, or some just need help getting started with these, or maybe somebody or all of you are using ILPs and just want some helpful tips on how to navigate through the process, or maybe you're just somewhere in between all of that. And so either way, we're hopeful that we can help you give you some pearls on how maybe to incorporate these ILPs into your programs. And so we have a quick poll question for all of you, and we're going to have you use your reaction buttons. And so if you're a program director or an associate program director, if you could give us a thumbs up. If you're a core faculty, if you could give us a heart. Or if you're a program coordinator or an administrator or something else within your program, give us that big oh my face, like the O face, I guess is the best way to say it. So, all right, so we've got a good, oh, look, we got some program directors and some administrators. Way to go, Joy. Being a leader there, exciting for that. All right, the next question, again, those program directors use the heart, or I'm sorry, not program directors. If you've been doing this less than 5 years, let's give us a heart. If you're doing this from 5 to 10 years, give us the thumbs up. We'll just do 10 years and above. Give us that big, oh, my face. So, okay. So kind of a in between there. Okay, wonderful. Super exciting. All right. Thank you all for answering those questions for us. So what is required of us? This is one of the things that I think a lot of people get hung up on here with the ACGME and the ILPs. And so the program director or their designee, which could be their associate program director or another leader within their program, with the input from your clinical competency committee, must do the following things. And so they need to assist the residents in developing their ILP learning plans to capitalize on their strengths and identify areas for growth. And this is one of the things that we'll talk a lot about and that Dr. Lambert will touch on, is that it's really important that your residents are leading the way in their ILP. It's important, okay? We're also going to talk a little bit about creating a document for those ILPs at least annually. I think we both, Dr. Lambert and I, would highly suggest that you look at these ILPs more than once a year, that we encourage you to using your coaches or your advisors to go over these ILPs with the residents multiple times throughout the year. And then we're also going to talk about why the ACGME is requiring that we provide a system to assist the residents with their ILP and what the process includes. So again, we just talked about those coaches or those advisors or a faculty mentorship to help create those learning goals within their ILPs, as well as those educational experiences that your residents are striving to meet throughout their 3 years of residency in family medicine. And then again, a system for tracking and monitoring the progress for these residents and how they're completing their ILPs throughout their 3 years of residency. So the objectives today, we're going to talk about the difference between a remediation plan and an ILP. We're going to talk about components for those ILPs and some pearls to develop ILPs within your program. We have one more question for you all before we jump into the thick of this. So what we would like to know are you confident that you could explain the difference between a remediation plan and a learning plan? So thumbs up, absolutely. I can teach our residents this annually. Thumbs down, I think so, but don't ask me to answer the question out loud. Or we'll do a heart. There's a difference. Is there a difference between the two? If y'all could respond to that. Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. Okay, Dr. Lambert, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a question that comes up not uncommonly. You have Monica, the chief resident, who's an all-star doing everything right. And then you've got Steve, a PGY2, who's on a remediation plan for his in-training exam again. And then you start talking about ILPs, individualized learning plans, and Steve's like, hold on, I see through your tricks. Isn't this just a remediation plan with a different name? Like, I don't get the difference. So, and a lot of faculty may not know, but there are some really important distinctions that we'd like to highlight. So when we think about remediation plans are reactive. They are typically made in response to a deficiency in learner performance or in learner knowledge. They are typically not given to everybody. They are only created for those learners who have a deficiency. And then that kind of makes a stigma that if word gets out that, Steve has a remediation plan, then everybody knows he is not measuring up. And it makes this kind of less than or outsider kind of stigma. Remediation plans also usually focus just on gaps, and the goal is to reach is whatever the minimum training requirement is for that particular thing, because you just want them to get back up at least good enough to graduate. But ILPs, in contrast, are proactive. They are intended for everybody, and they always kind of have been in education, but we historically, the larger we haven't really used them that way. We've used these terms interchangeably a lot. A learning plan was meant as a remediation plan, but in the truest sense of it, and also in the sense of the 2023 ACGME requirements, everybody is supposed to have a learning plan. And I was actually really happy when I saw that as one of the changes for the new requirements, even though it can be a little stressful, because ILPs are supposed to focus on the end result, not just the minimum training requirement. If you give everyone an ILP, then it's a normal thing. And that stigma of I have my own learning plan kind of goes away, because it helps recognize that everybody's learning curve is different. Nobody learns everything at the same rate. And so it allows for some of those personalized learning styles. also, learning plans don't just have to focus on the minimum training requirement. Maybe it does for a certain resident and certain portions of it, but with an ILP, you can set goals that push them past minimum competency, that dare I say even toward mastery. If there are, family medicine has a very broad training scope. We may not be the ultimate expert in every aspect of family medicine, but we all kind of have that area that we really shine and we really feel passionate about. If you have an ILP, you can set those more ambitious goals for that part that really excites the learner and push them toward really truly being a role model and an example and kind of a master learner in that area. But they do have a few things in common. Both remediation plans and learning plans outline ways to improve. Both of them do use or should use concrete benchmarks to measure achievement. You've got to have something very tangible to say, this is how I know I've succeeded. We shouldn't be setting vague things like, learn more about something, or my favorite, be more efficient in clinic. Well, what does that really mean? How does the learner know when they have become more efficient if we don't set realistic marks? They should not be more efficient. They should get all their charts done within 2 business days, or something that they can measure and say, yes, I am now doing that. So that really ought to be a part of either one. But hopefully this helps kind of explain a little bit about the difference and why we should be leaning more toward learning plans, ILPs for all of our residents. If they do have deficiencies or gaps, you can incorporate that into their learning plan, make that one of their goals, but they don't need a separate plan that's going to distinguish them out. It's really more of a preventative kind of mindset, and aren't we supposed to be all about preventative care in family medicine? The key, though, is it really is a culture shift that has to come from the top. Your residency leadership, your residency faculty have to start using this language and referring to their ILPs, saying, hey, can you pull up your ILP? What are we supposed to be working on? Like, reference these things a lot, use the language a lot so that we normalize it, that everybody has one. And so it doesn't just become a renamed remediation plan. Now, when we are writing these plans, though, when we're making ILPs, we need to keep our audience in mind. And by that, I mean both audiences, both the learner side of the ILP and the faculty member who is helping them write it. You will get some pushback sometimes from either from learners or from faculty, because we're coming at it from different viewpoints. And I put this slide up not to get into a big discussion about labels of generations or anything like that, but there are some trends that tend to crop up. And I think it's important to keep those in mind, because right now, at this moment, we have physicians from at least 4 different generations. And this particular article came out before Gen Z was really catching on and old enough to be a generation yet. But we have residents and we have faculty in all 4 generations. And it's good to know how the way, in generally speaking, someone from that generation views the world and how that plays into things. So this was a study from 2018 in the Journal of Lifelong Learning and Psychiatry. And what we see right now is that majority of our learners, with the exception of some non-traditional learners, are in the millennial generation, and some of our faculty are as well. And we've got some Gen Zers out there at this point, at least in medical school. And there is a difference. And I want to make sure that I say differences are not bad. We have had some conversations at my program when generational speak has come up, and it's often been used to label or put somebody in a box or to put someone down. And I think every generation has their strengths and their challenges. It doesn't necessarily, because we did it one certain way, doesn't necessarily mean that was the right way. Maybe it did, I don't know that it was necessarily healthy that we worked so many hours and without breaks and all that. Just because we did it and survived, if you look at a quick Google search for depression rates and divorce rates in physicians, maybe that wasn't the smartest way to do it. Maybe we should have had more work-life balance. But what their current generation of learners tends to want to participate more, tends to want more feedback more readily available, tends to want more flexibility and options, and feel like they have a little bit more say and control over their own education. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think that's a bad thing. It does have to be tempered, and it does have to be balanced. But we can use that to our advantage. Those of us who are maybe in other generations grew up viewing the world differently because of the time that we grew up, and some of us have changed our viewpoints and some of us haven't, but that's okay. Like I said, not one isn't good or bad. But what I particularly want to highlight out of this chart really is feedback and work-life balance, and just paying attention to what expectations are of the people who are on the receiving end of these ILPs, and also the people who are on the authoring end, so to speak, of these ILPs, and how, let's keep in mind how our worldviews will color the way we want to put these things in so that we're truly being collaborative. It's also important to keep in mind the pillars of CBME, so they're called, as we make these ILPs. And if you're a program that already has an ILP for everybody, that's great. I would encourage you to take a look at it and see if it meets each of these pillars. If you don't have one yet and you're making one, you can incorporate them as you go. But we need to think, are our ILPs focused on outcomes primarily? What is the learner, what is the graduate need to be able to do to be an independent family physician or an independently functioning physician? Are we more worried about the outcomes and the end result, or does our ILP focus on the number of weeks spent in a curriculum, or the number of questions answered or EKGs interpreted? What's the important outcome that you need to work on? Does your ILP support learner progression? Is there a way that the learning is sequenced so that you are what's called scaffolding your learning? You're starting with basic concepts, and then once they grasp that, you are building onto what they've already learned, rather than just totally shifting from one topic to another unrelated topic. Can we see the building on and progress? Is it flexible for that individual and what they need to be able to do when they graduate? So if we think about time not as a driver, but as a resource, is what we're encouraged to do with the pillars. My resident isn't good at cardiology because they spent 4 weeks on cardiology and didn't fail. They're good at cardiology because they can explain the concepts of different cardiovascular diseases and understand what they need to do about them. If that takes 6 weeks, if that takes 8 weeks, if that takes longer, or if they can grasp it in 2 weeks, that's great. The point is not that they spent the required amount of time. The point is that they understand the concepts and can apply them in the end. Is it responsive to learner needs? And this is kind of where those individual learning curves come. Does your ILP structure itself in such a way that if resident A really grasps a subject quickly but struggles with a second subject, can they adjust their learning goals? Can they adjust their curriculum to meet that, versus resident B, who might really struggle with the first topic, but once they get that, they fly through the subsequent things? Is it built in a way that can support that? And then you're never going to know if they reach their goals unless they are assessed, right? And the best way to have assessments is to have lots and lots of assessments, and in different ways by different people, with a little bit of test questions, a little bit of OSCEs, a whole lot of direct observation, because ultimately we want them to be able to perform in the clinical setting. So we need to be observing them in the clinical setting to make sure that they are doing the outcomes that we need them to do. And we need a lot of assessment to be able to do that. So what actually has to go in an ILP? What are the parts of it? You've got Dr. Grumpy, who says, this sounds like a lot of work. How much more work is this going to we don't have a lot of faculty. We're not staffed up where we should be. How much of my time is this going to take up? But you've got Dr. Anita Wynn, who's the program director, who's like, I got to make this work. This is an HCGME requirement. We're going to figure this out. So you don't necessarily have to answer on this one, but reflect for yourself. How do you feel if your program has an ILP that you use already? How do you feel about it? Are you like, wow, it's great. I'm just here because somebody made me, or I didn't want the presenters to feel bad. If that's you, we really appreciate you. We heart you. That was very thoughtful. You're probably here, I would guess, because you're either in one of these other categories of it's good, but I think it could be better, or, well, we have one, and then you don't say anything else. Or I think we might have one somewhere. Let me look through these drawers. I feel like we used to have it. It's probably archived in a paper file somewhere in a filing cabinet. Or you were just hoping I wouldn't ask this question, in which case you came to the right place. We're going to talk about it some more. So there are some important components to any ILP, and I will encourage you to keep in mind the idea simpler is better. The more you put in it, the longer it takes to fill out, and the less frequently people are going to pull it out and update it. So your goal is to thread the needle for, you want enough information in there to be useful, but not so much that people don't even want to pull it out because it's overwhelming. And that, where that line falls is going to be a little bit different for every program. So it's up to you to kind of work with your program leadership and say, well, where is this line for us, depending on our staffing and our kind of our faculty's current buy-in with ILPs and that sort of thing. But all of them should involve a few things. And the first is self-reflection. Millennial learners tend to prefer having multiple learning formats, lots of different ways of learning. And there are studies to support that they tend to be more engaged when they have choices, when they have options. But with all of them, they need to have time for self-reflection. And this is a hard point for a lot of us as faculty who did not train with any protected time to think and reflect. We were supposed to do it over lunch or on the drive home when we were tired, or in the evenings, or we weren't expected to do it at all. But if we really want to create lifelong learners, and I was just talking about this with my program faculty this morning, if we really want to create lifelong learners, we have got to teach them how to reflect on their own learning. What did I learn? What have I still not gotten my mind wrapped around? What's the best way for me to learn that? Like, what kind of setting do I learn best in? We've got to give them time for that, because it's not a skill that they already know. A lot of people make it through medical school and into residency just because they're really good test takers and they're really good at memorizing information. And some of them get to residency and have never really had to reflect and struggle a little when they were learning. So we've got to build in at least a little bit of time during the workday with guided instruction for them to reflect on that some. We also know from child development studies that process praise yields more growth mindset than person praise. And what I mean by that is, if a child has heard their entire life, you are so smart, you are really, really smart, you're really good at math, that becomes part of their identity. I am a smart person. I am a good math person. And then one day they take a math class in college that's hard for them and they fail. And all of a sudden their entire identity is gone. Well, if I'm not good at math anymore, then who am I? What am I? But if that same child grows up hearing their whole childhood, you worked really hard on that. I'm really proud of you. You put in a lot of time on that. You worked really hard on that painting. You worked really hard studying for that test. You're praising the process that they did. Then what they are hearing is, I know how to do this. I know how to figure it out. And then they see new problems and they fail. They go, I messed up this test, but I know how to figure it out because I'm good at that. So acknowledging strengths and their struggles can help reinforce behaviors that you want to continue or behaviors that need to change. If when you're giving feedback, you're focusing on the process, things that they're processes that they are good at, processes that you see need a little bit more work. It's also important to merge that learning practice divide. It helps get buy-in from the residents when you're writing their ILP. If you don't just set a goal, but you explain why that goal is important for their future practice. If you don't just say you need to get better at getting your charts done, or you need to do better at coding in clinic, you're under coding, too many level 3s, you're doing a lot harder work than that. If we just say it like that and stop, it's going to look like it's just one more box to check to graduate. But if we say, look, you got to get better at your charts, because when you finish residency, you're going to have 10 half days a week of clinic instead of 4, and you're going to have twice as many patients to see in a week, twice as many charts to do, twice as much inbox. And if you don't come up with a system for that, you're going to burn out. And I don't want that for you. So let's help you figure out a system now while you're a little protected. All of a sudden, that has a very different meaning and motivation behind it than just, you got to get faster in clinic because I said so. Or you need to code better. Let me explain RVUs to you and how your salary is going to be affected if you don't code correctly. Here's the real world difference in your income if you undercode like this. Try to link the skills that you're teaching them to why they're important in future practice. And then also having those objectives that are very clear and delineated. Most of us have heard of SMART goals at this point. I'm going to be bold and introduce the idea of SMART E goals, if that isn't something you've heard before. So still the same, a lot of the same components. If you're setting a goal, it needs to be specific so they know what it is they're trying to accomplish, measurable so they know that they got there. It needs to be attainable so that it's something that realistically a PGY1 could accomplish, or a PGY2 could accomplish, or someone at your program. There may be a training type of procedure that you're trying to get them to learn, and your program just doesn't offer it. And in order to learn it, they'd have to scour the countryside, finding a specialist who will teach them. That's not an attainable goal. It needs to be relevant, of course, to their practice, which in family medicine, most things are. And you need to set a deadline, a time. I want you to be able to do this in 3 months or in 6 months or by this time. But then also to add in the idea of, is your goal inclusive? Is it equitable? So have you brought in all the different populations that are going to be involved in this? And by that could mean, I want you to learn about population health. I want you to get better at population health. We're going to set a goal around that. And I also want you to talk to somebody at the health department, or I want you to talk to somebody at the nonprofit clinic up the street to see how your project will impact them, or they could help you. And are you setting up a goal that encompasses all the different populations that your clinic serves? Is this going to be a goal of treatment that half of your clinic population can't access because they don't have transportation, or because English isn't their first language, or some other health disparity that you're leaving out in your learning and in your clinical goals because you didn't take that into account. So if you do not have an ILP yet for everybody, or if you have one but you don't love it yet, I'm going to throw out a suggestion. So this CBME task force that Pamela and I are part of created a toolkit, and the website is right there, stfm.org/CBME toolkit. Or if you just Google CBME toolkit, this is typically the first link that comes up, if you can't remember that. You do not have to be a member of STFM to access the toolkit. It is free and available to anyone. My grandmother could Google it and find it if she knew how to use Google. And so if you do that and you go to that link, it's going to pull up a website with lots of different resources. And one of them is an ILP template. And so this is the template we made. It is intentionally very simple. It is meant to be a starting point, a framework that you can build off of. And it's structured in sections conveniently labeled I, L, and P. So after the resident's name and their information, the first section is I, or individual. So I challenge all of my residents every time we sit down to talk. I say, if you had to get a job today, what kind of job would you want? Would you, understanding that for a lot of residents, that is going to change multiple times over the course of residency. But right now, today, if you want to be a hospitalist, that is going to impact the kinds of learning experiences that we set up for you. If you want to be a rural outpatient doctor, that is going to change the kind of learning experiences you want. So it starts out asking, what are your long-term career goals as of right now? And what are things that I still need to work on to be able to get that, be that person and get that goal? So that is kind of that connecting it to your future career goals. Then the learning section, the second section, is what are your strengths and your struggles? And it encourages you, if this isn't your very first ILP as an intern, look back, it kind of cues you to look back at your last ILP and say, did you achieve all the goals you set for your last one? And if not, what do you still need to work on? Because that's important. The point is that we revisit this multiple times, but it doesn't do us any good if we write this down and never look at it again. So there's a cue in there to go back and look at your last one. And then the plan is the last to set up your goals for the next whatever time period, 3 months, 6 months. And there are drop-down boxes on the template online that will populate in the core outcomes that we are all adjusting to from the ABFM. So you can link their goals directly to the ABFM core outcomes if you want to do that. And then we did add a spot for a wellness objective as well. So like I said, this is meant to be a template, a starting point. If you already have a ILP that you like, it's great. There is no right or wrong template necessarily. I'm not saying you need to change this one. It's just available in there if you would like. And then if you want to add things to it for your individual program, that's great. And just as a reference, the 15 core outcomes. So we get a lot of questions. This is a little off topic of ILPs, but just because we get a lot of questions about it, are the core outcomes replacing the milestones? No, they are two separate things. So the ACGME writes created milestones. Milestones are primarily there to ensure that your program is able to train residents adequately and show that they make progress as they go through your program from start to finish. The core outcomes are from the ABFM, and they are there to ensure that individual graduates are ready for board certification. So two different purposes, although they do tend to flow together, and we can do a whole other talk on how you map these things together to make them work in harmony rather than two separate tasks to do.
All right, so here we have the next slide of may go for it, your program coordinator or administrator or manager, whatever title it is that you use it within your institution and program. And so we're going to give you just a couple pearls here for your ILPs, and then we'll have some time for question and answer and maybe some sharing about how we do our ILPs within our own institutions. To start off with, we want to make sure, again, as Dr. Lambert mentioned, that we're coaching our residents to self-identify their strengths and their struggles. And we want them to incorporate that into their ILP. And again, we want them to be going back multiple times throughout the academic year to look at what those strengths and struggles are and work on those goals and potentially meet certain goals and potentially write new goals. We also want to make sure that it's linking to those core outcomes. And as Dr. Lambert mentioned, on the CBME toolkit, there is a mapping out there that the core outcomes map to milestones, and you can kind of see how that works. Keep in mind, all programs are different, and so that's not the be-all end-all, but it is kind of a general idea of how you could map those core outcomes to milestones and potentially use those when your residents are creating their ILPs for their future goals. And then last but not least is this MedHub or New Innovations or potentially Office 365 and where you house your ILP document. So I'm curious here, and again, we could just use thumbs up or thumbs down. So we'll do thumbs up if you use New Innovations, thumbs down if you use MedHub, and a heart emoji if you're doing something different within your program. I'd just be curious to kind of see where everyone is at with that. Hearts. Oh, so something different. All right. Okay, so I'll just share a little bit about my program and kind of how we do our ILPs, and then we'll let Dr. Lambert jump in here and explain how they do ILPs at their program. And so we took the ILP document that the STFM task force created, and we kind of turned it into our own document. We added a few things, but we created a folder for each of our residents within Office 365 within OneDrive. And so the resident has access to their OneDrive folder as well as their advisor, their faculty advisor, and the program director and the associate program director. So at any time, if somebody needs to access that ILP document, I can go out and look at the document, their faculty can, their faculty advisor or the program director or the associate program director. And we use that during their advisor meetings that happen 3 times a year. And our program director also uses that with his semi-annual program director reviews that he does with each of our residents. And we keep this as a live document, as Dr. Lambert mentioned, and we use new innovations at my institution. And so what we do is we create those reviews within the new innovation software under portfolios, and we attach the live version of the ILP, but once the advisor meets with the resident and they go over their individualized learning plan, they take a screenshot or basically create a PDF of that view or that moment in time from that ILP, and they attach it to that review within new innovations. So when the program director meets with them, they can go back and review that ILP and see where they were at the time that they met with their advisor, but they also can go back to that OneDrive document and see what's been added to that ILP to make sure that the resident is meeting the milestones that they've created for themselves. And it's been a huge benefit for us. As most programs, right, we rolled out ILPs this year because it was a requirement. And what we have found is it has been a huge learning tool for our residents and for our faculty. And as Dr. Lambert mentioned, the residents really are engaged and love that they're part of the process and not that their advisor is just telling them what they need to do or telling them what goals they need to meet. They're encouraging them and allowing them to kind of create their own learning path, but also giving them guidance in things maybe that they need assistance with or things that they could work on as far as struggles. And then they also are giving them encouraging comments about their strengths and how they've met those goals. So it's been a good benefit, I think, for our residents and for our faculty. I think they both learn from this process, and it's been an engaging experience for all of them. So I'll let Dr. Lambert talk about his program because I know he does stuff differently.
Yeah, not everything differently. So our program uses MedHub, and we started a couple of different things. We also do our ILPs through Office 365. It's accessible because our institution pays for it. It's very easy to create documents and to control who has access to them. And then, like Pamela said, the really important thing is that it's easy to access whether you're at work or at home or anywhere. So the resident and their faculty advisor and myself and our program coordinator are pretty much the ones with access to each individual ILP. We use the template that you saw that we showed you from the STFM. But each time they meet, which is our goal is at least 3 times a year, with their advisor, they kind of copy and paste to the next page for a new document. And so if they are a 3rd year, in theory, once we've done it in 3 years, they will be able to just scroll back up to the page before and the page before and go all the way back to their very first goals as a brand new intern, all within the same document. And then they copy and paste it down the next time and reflect on what they accomplished and set new goals. So likewise, it is a kind of a dynamic document. And then we also used it to feed into portfolios. So we started this past July, we started making portfolios in Microsoft OneNote for each resident. And there is a folder in their portfolio for each of the 15 core outcomes. And the combination of the residents and faculty will populate when they get an assessment or an rotation evaluation or an ITE scores or what have you. They will, we will put that in whatever appropriate core outcome folder it speaks to, and sometimes it speaks to multiple, and that's okay. But OneNote is very easy then for them to manipulate or to add screenshots, or if they had a really interesting clinical case with an X-ray, they can screenshot the X-ray and put it in there and comment on it, or the faculty can add feedback comments very easily. And that's been, we use the ILP to say, well, when we looked at your portfolio, you were missing a lot of evidence on core outcome 7. Let's make a goal around core outcome 7 for your next ILP to make sure that you've got evidence for your competency in all of these core outcomes by the time you graduate. And so the ILP is kind of your roadmap that helps you collect evidence for all those competencies that we have to attest to. And what we have found too is that it has helped with accountability. We put a whiteboard up in the resident workroom, and each resident is supposed to take something from their ILP or something that they're individually trying to work on, a specific skill or knowledge set, and they write it next to their name up on that whiteboard. And that way, when our preceptor faculty are there, we don't always, none of us always know exactly what each resident's trying to work on. But when I go to precept, I can look at the board and see who's in clinic that afternoon and say, all right, you said you were trying to get better at shoulder exams. Let's do a shoulder exam on every physical you have today, and I'll go in with you and let's look at it. So it's kind of helped give us as precepting faculty a target when what we have to teach them is so broad. If I know this is the thing I really want to work on this week or right now, I can target that, and it becomes a lot simpler to teach.
Tag on to that. You also, if your programs are leading the way and looking at those direct observation assessments, this is a whole nother discussion and a whole nother probably webinar that can be given. But what Dr. Lambert just mentioned, as far as, making sure that the resident can do a proper shoulder exam, you can also do that in your direct assessment observation form, which then would feed into those core outcomes, so that when you're doing your CCCs, you can review that, and that information comes directly over from those evaluations that are completed within MedHub or a new innovation. So this all kind of ties together to multiple things. So good example, Dr. Lambert. All right, so now's the time. If any of you have questions for Dr. Lambert or I, or if you have other ideas or things that you want to share about how your program does it, we'd love to hear it, because we've been doing this talk now for almost 2 years. And every time we do it, we hear something new. So it's always fun to hear what other people are doing within their institutions and their programs. So please feel free to turn off your microphone and share. And I'm one of those who loves to see faces. So if you want to turn your cameras on, we'd love to see who we're talking to. That's always wonderful, instead of just talking to a name. There comes a camera. There we go. Joy, yay, Joy. She's unmuting herself so she can ask a question or tell us what she did.
Well, I really don't have a question, but I do very much appreciate you all taking the time to do this. I've been with my program for a year, but we're just now getting to the point where we're starting a program. So I haven't used any of this stuff yet, so I'm here just to learn and observe, but it's wonderful, very informative. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. And I'm going to put my email address in here and my cell phone number. So if you have questions, Joy, when you're getting ready to implement all this stuff, or whatever software system you're using, I'm more than happy to help you navigate through that and get things set up so that you have it all ready to go for your program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I put my email on there. Both our emails are on the screen as well, but I also put the link to that CPME toolkit. If you want to look at the ILPs, there's a lot of other folders about types of assessments and mapping your milestones to your core outcomes and all that. So feel free to check that out. All of the webinars that the STFM task force has done, which I think we're up to 14 or 15 at this point, all of those are recorded and are on that toolkit as well. Or the slides, if you're like, I don't have an hour to sit and watch a recording of a thing, you can pull up the slides or the resources that we use to make those presentations, and you can just scroll quickly through the slides and reference them as well. So that'll be helpful.
Also,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I will also add, for those of you that are program directors on here, if you are part of the AFMRD, we have done some webinars for them as well. I think we're on webinar 3 now of a series. And so we've talked about CBME and core outcomes and ILPs as well. So Becky, did you have a question? I saw your camera come on. I'm gonna let you talk.
Yeah, it sounds like from your programs, your residents are really invested and find it useful. We've been doing ILPs for a couple years, and I think people are just doing it because they have to do it. Some seem a little bit more invested, but I'm curious if you have any tips on like getting residents to be a little bit more hands-on with it.
Dr. Lambert, I'll let you go first.
First of all, I will sympathize. Please do not take our presentation to mean that all of our residents are just bubbling over with enthusiasm about doing ILPs or portfolios. It is very much learner dependent. We have some residents who really dive in. We have some who fight us every step of the way. Most of our residents fall somewhere in between those two extremes. So you are not alone. But I will say, when we started giving some periodic protected time, that helped. One of the things that we do for our advisors is twice a year, the advisor does one-on-one precepting with that resident in their clinic. So they get their full attention. And we charge the preceptor, though, with going in the room, or we did get approval from our institution's risk management to use Teams. So we don't have to awkwardly stand in the corner of the room with being watched, but we set up a Teams meeting either on their laptop or their phone, and they take that in and they say, my preceptor is going to be observing through here. We leave our screen off and everything, but it's a little less awkward than having us physically standing in the room. And so we charge our preceptor with doing a good bit of one-on-one precepting or in the room active precepting during that time. And we also block off the last hour of that half day for the advisor and the resident to have their quarterly meeting and talk about their ILP. And both the residents and the advisors have really given us positive feedback about that. I think the residents enjoy getting the feedback in a way that is not as challenging as when your preceptor has 4 residents and they're scrambling for their attention. And the faculty really enjoy getting to take a deep dive with one resident and not have all the others kind of competing for time, and then have that time to our advisor meetings used to happen over lunch or at the end of the day. And neither one of them we're as faculty, we don't want to stay after 5 to do a meeting or use up our lunch. We're doing our own charts or something, during our lunch. And so we got a lot of positive feedback from both sides doing that. And then I will just say, if you keep it simpler, the simpler the ILP is, the easier it is to pick up and do. But I think one of the best things for engagement has been that one-on-one precepting time. It's a little bit more from a financial standpoint because you're pulling a second preceptor on those days, but it's been totally worth it.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea. They at least have like more experience with maybe some of the feedback that's coming in from other sources. So when you have that hour blocked after that, do you typically have the resident then like self-reflect on their goals before the 2 would meet, or how do you?
Ideally, yes.
Just jump right in.
Does it always happen before? No.
Yeah.
But the goal is that they will have at least looked at their ILP before that day. And If it hasn't happened that way, then the preceptor, once they're done with patients, says, let's sit down and look at your ILP together. How do you think you've done since last time? What do you think you've accomplished? What do you still need to work on? And sometimes it's medical knowledge, sometimes it's procedural skills, sometimes it's practice management stuff, like I'm not that great at coding, or I could be better at using epic smart phrases. Well, I have some I use, let me show you. And like whatever's going to help them keep that end in mind, like what skills do they need to be an independently practicing physician? And so there's not a lot of structure around it other than we do expect them to go over their ILP together and create, reflect and then create new goals, that sort of thing.
Great. Thank you.
I would tag on to that with what Dr. Lambert just talked about. We do what we call them focus clinics, basically the same concept as Dr. Lambert. And I actually schedule a resident with an attending. Typically it's our first and second years. And they usually have 1 or 2 half day sessions each month that they do a focus clinic with a different faculty advisor. It's different people. So it's not the same person all the time. So they're getting different views, which I think is important. And I also would add that use your program administrator to help navigate through the system and navigate promoting being positive about ILPs. And I think a lot of residents, when they come to your program, I will just speak on my program. This year, when our new residents started, my program director sent out an email to all of them and explained what an ILP was and what the concept behind it was. And, he asked them questions and just kind of started the framework for an ILP before they even started residency. And so we kind of had somewhere to start with, which I think was very helpful. And it created an environment where the resident felt like they were engaged in their own learning and it wasn't somebody just telling them what they had to do. I spend a lot of time looking at all of these documents and, I'll reach out to the resident and go, hey, I see you haven't updated your ILP in a while. Have you looked at your goals and objectives? And have you thought about where you're moving with these things so that when you meet with your advisor, you have some answers, or you've updated this ILP and it's not me having to text you going, you haven't updated your ILP yet. Why haven't you done this? And like Dr. Lambert said, there's always 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 within a program that you have to remind to do all of these things. But I think the more that you're engaged and the more that you talk about it in a positive light, the more the resident is going to be engaged and be excited about their own learning and that they can plan their own future based off of what their goals are and trying to reach those goals.
That's a great point.
Great, thank you.
You can say the same thing and with different words, and it comes across as very different messages. And our new interns set their first ILP goals during orientation.
Okay.
And because everybody's got tons to learn, especially straight out of medical school, but we set it up right at orientation, like this is what we do, here's how we set your next goals, and really kind of spin it as, like I said, the current generation of learners really likes to have a voice and likes to have a say. And so I say, this is your opportunity to have your voice in what you want to learn or what you feel like you need to learn. This is your chance. And if you don't engage in your ILP, somebody else is going to set your learning path for you. So I need you to tell me what you want to learn. And sometimes they come with stuff way out in left field and you have to rein them in, but they're at least engaged. And I would take an engaged resident who's swinging for the fences and have to pull them in any day over the one who just sits there and doesn't give me anything. So a lot of it is how you phrase it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
I also would add to this that when the STFM created this task force and we started talking about ILPs, we actually had a resident on our subcommittee that Dr. Lambert and I were on when we created this ILP. And he was very passionate about, the resident needs to feel engaged and the resident should be, leading this ILP, which is part of why we created the document that you'll see on the STFM website, and why it is reflective for the resident to be able to add there instead of a faculty writing it for them.
I know we need to be mindful of everybody's time. If you all have any more questions, you've got both our emails, feel free to reach out. And I will just say as a last closing thought, I know a lot of this can feel very overwhelming. Even if you're already doing a lot of things, the amount of competency-based medical education changes and pushes by the ACGME and ABFM can feel very overwhelming. And it's hard to decide like where you start. So I would just start with things that you already, low-hanging fruits of already, if you already have an ILP, maybe the wording just needs tweaked a little bit. Or you like your form, but you need to change the way you do your meetings. Maybe you're going to add a little one-on-one precepting or something. Like, find some small achievable change that you can make just to get started. You don't have to do everything all right the first time. Find a little easy, achievable changes that you can say, well, I can change that form, or I can set up these meetings a little differently, or I can say things differently to the residents, when I'm talking to, like, find something small and start there. And then once that becomes normal part of your culture, take another bite. It's like how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, although I don't know anybody who eats elephants, but it's a weird metaphor, but it pertains, so find those little things that you can do, and then do another little thing, and then do another little thing. And before you know it, you're going to have a lot of improvements to your program, a lot of positive changes to your program.
Thank you for allowing us to talk with y'all today.
Give us feedback on the survey so we know how we did.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Dr. Lambert and Pamela for this really great session, great topics, and questions and discussion at the end too. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.